Wait, does it? Wait, do most
well,
map creation mode anymore?
Not map.
No, not map creation mode, but the ability to share your gameplay and customize your gameplay. So games don't have to do that by changing the map. It just so happens that for shooters, it is one of the most reliable ways to make it happen. But it's just a microcosm of your ability to customize your experience. So putting different armor pieces on your person, that qualifies as well. Being able to customize the difficulty of your experience, that can matter as well, as long as it's fun to watch. Stuff like that. So yeah, it wasn't me talking about map creation in particular. It's more of that is something every game thinks they need to solve as a problem and have come up with a solution for, whether it's the same one or a different solution.
I think another example of this, Tomb Raider recently came out, and it had a lot of people were reporting on the difficulty modes and how they change.
Yeah, you can customize them for puzzles or just for combat. Yeah, I love.
And one thing I thought was cool is how they can change the audio of the game to have the indigenous language being presented in the area. Instead of everyone speaking English with an accent, they're all speaking the language they would speak because it's not an English-speaking place.
Absolutely, and that is... It kind of plays into what we were talking about baking in your customization of a genre into the game, because you can make that game almost devoid of platforming segments, as an example, by turning platforming to the easiest setting, or make it more of a kind of excavation game by turning combat down to the easiest setting.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get to play the new Tomb Raider? Because I unfortunately have not seen much of it myself.
I don't own it, but I played it for like an hour.
I have not played it. I feel like it's been... I think we're going to look at that as a trilogy that was drastically overlooked and unfairly overlooked. No, I think there's a lot of good stuff because I played like some of the demos for the previous games and they feel good. They have a lot of good stuff inside them. I think with the newest one that came out, Rise of the Tomb Raider. It just comes out at a really bad month, right before Red Dead and Call of Duty, and right after Spider-Man, which I guess you can argue it wasn't going to be big. Yeah. It's also just a really packed year in general.
Yeah, and also I think a lot of people were hoping that the second game would kind of delve more into the tomb raiding aspect of it, and instead of fixing it for that installment, they fixed it for the third one. So a lot of people bought Rise, or was Rise the second one or Shadow?
Shadow.
So they bought Shadow and then were disappointed. So I think a lot of people are going to buy Rise, but they're going to buy it on a discount because it wasn't in their minds as, oh, I'm waiting for this to come out. I don't know, you see that as a kind of a big deal in general, where either the base game influences the DLC, or the previous installment of the franchise influences the next one. Like Destiny 2, their solution for that problem is making the base game free for anyone to get for, what is it, like 2 weeks or whatever? But point is, a decent amount of time, simply to help incentivize people to buy the DLC.
Destiny, it's such a... For me, it's a heartbreaking genre, because there's a lot of promise there, and a lot of interesting things that, for me, just never grabbed my attention, or just were not executed well.
I'll say this, I've been playing it for like the past 2 days. I'm enjoying it.
I've played this.
No, it's improved a lot since launch. The thing about Destiny 2 was the first year of its lifetime was really rough. Like, a lot of the scaling was a little harsh. The end game was, for most people, devoid of content. And so they sort of fixed that solution more or less recently, kind of like they did for Destiny 1 with Taken King. And so now they're bringing in people saying, hey, look, we've improved the game, we've made it so much better, pay $40 for this new DLC. But yeah, if you're playing the base game now, it's a great value for the cost of 0.
Oh yeah.
I think it's like a very interesting case of Stockholm syndrome. People are just in it and then heavily abused, but they love it.
Yeah, I think the looter shooter genre in general, like The Division's a good example of another game that was a looter shooter, like MMO light type game that toward the end of its lifetime got significantly better. Of course, we'll have to wait and see if The Division 2 capitalizes on that and delivers a refined product, or pulls a Destiny 2 and backtracks in certain areas.
I want to bring up a topic or an idea just based on what you said there. I think we're seeing a lot of people. It's a bit of a businessy question, a bit of like a design dev question. People are kind of committed to fixing games when they come out poorly, or don't necessarily hit the way they want them to hit. And I just want to know what your thoughts are on that type of choice that publishers and developers are going forward. What do you think of the fact that we have the first year of Destiny 2 being bad, but every year after being great? Like that becomes a new norm, or the new way people kind of look at development.
Can I answer first?
So
I know Dom's answer is gonna be long. Can I just answer first?
Okay, yeah, go.
I like it. I think it's a shady kind of way to develop a game and fix a game and make it fit your audience. But I mean, in the end, you still get a satisfying product. I mean, it'll take a while, yeah. But I mean, I'm just saying this because I like The Division. Like, yeah, it took them 3 years to actually come out, or 2 years to actually make the game good. I like it.
I think Ubisoft is really good at this because they did this with they did this Rainbow Six Siege. They did this with For Honor. They did this with Rainbow Six. God, I forgot the open world one. But yeah, I don't know. I find it very interesting because I think it's hopeful in some ways. Like, oh, we messed up here, but we can fix it, and I like that. But that shady business side of it is always a little weird.
I mean, interesting about Ubisoft. Sorry, one last thing just to add. That people are also thinking though that Ubisoft made those improvements just to capitalize on EA's fall from Battle.
Oh, you mean that time period?
Yes.
Like,
yes. So it's interesting to think, like, did they actually do it for the sake of their community and the games, or did they do it did they make fixes and improvements just to like capitalize?
The answer is that it doesn't matter. So, just like any business decisions, the bottom line is what really matters. And in this case, there's two different bottom lines. Does it end up being better for the consumer, and does it end up being better for the publisher? Incidentally, developers almost never have a say in that conversation. At best, the top person at influential developers do. Like, I'm sure Bungie had a say in Destiny, but generally speaking, those are publisher decisions because they're so tied to budgets. And getting budget for a game that is technically already done used to be harder than getting budget for a new game. Of course, with games as a platform getting so much more money these days, that's an easier sell.
I guess what prompted this question was just noticing how this has become a recurring thing that I keep on hearing. The first year of X game is bad. Following year, this game is resurrected. And I think in terms of budgeting, that makes sense. You already put the money down to develop the base project, and you put maybe a quarter of the original budget to fixing it and getting more out of it. For
the record, it's almost always way less than that.
Okay. I'm just throwing out that as an example. And I find that in some ways I prefer this method. I like the fact that games exist a little longer. People seem to be getting more out of their money in some ways. I guess I don't know. We know that Brian likes it. Dom, what are your thoughts? Do you like this as a consumer? Maybe what are your thoughts if you were seeing this from the business end? What would you want to do this as well?
Yes, because I think it's by far the better business decision these days. Because if you look at the income numbers for pretty much any publisher's quarterlies, the amount of income they make from microtransactions. So that is to say, an enduring player base for a game buying smaller things from that game is making them far more money than selling the game itself ever does. Yeah, it's not even close.
Back before this talk, we were talking about possibly changing the price of a base game from maybe $60 to a little bit more. We can see $70, $80, as that used to be the standard way back when. Do you think that's something that maybe we should go back to, or do you think this is kind of the answer to that problem where the rising cost of development needs to bring in income in a different way?
Yeah, so we're never going back to charging a higher one-time price. The amount of extra money is way too high from a recurring revenue stream, and then also it's easier for the business people to run the numbers when you can calculate, oh, we're making this amount of money per month, so then we should also pay this amount for the DLC, rather than, oh, okay, 4 years from now we might make this much off release.
Yeah.
So to give you an example, Activision/Blizzard, because they're together at the company level, made over $4 billion in microtransactions in 2017, which was over half of its total revenue. And most people would argue that Blizzard has some of the best per cost single time offerings in the industry.
Right.
And Activision has Call of Duty.
Now I want to ask, because people see those numbers and they get concerned and afraid of the trend that could maybe influence the way games are built in the future. Do you have that as any concern about that, or because you know that these microtransactions are coming out of single time use, maybe cosmetic purchases? Do you think that's going to negatively affect the quality of what people end up creating and consuming?
So, I think those arguments are usually based off of two incorrect assumptions. One is that microtransactions, or companies make more or less an average amount of money on microtransactions per user, and that is never how it's calculated, because it's all about whales, which is the slang industry term, for those who don't know, for single people or single players who spend extremely high amounts of money.
I've heard of these whales.
How much are we talking about?
So we're talking about, if you're saying, oh, okay, well, if people can pay $1 for a loot box in X game, then you would assume that the average per user is like 0.2 or 0.1, whatever it is. Whereas it's much more like one person pays $10,000 to buy 10,000 of these loot packs, and 10,000 other players never spend a cent.
It's not unheard of. I've heard of several stories of people just falling into holes where they spend thousands, hundreds, and max out credit cards on purpose, on accident, just because they want to get the right loot box, the right skin. It might bring up some ethical questions in some cases, like what's going on with these people to be in this position, or you find out that these people are just well off and they can afford it and they just love the experience. That might be a little naive speaking, but it kind of makes you feel that it makes me, as someone who wants to get in the street and more on the design side, it makes me wonder, are those problems I need to think about, and what would I want to do to solve, or is there an ethical dilemma I should have when going about this type of thing?
Yeah, I mean,
That's a really good question.
it's a good thing to think about. You just won't be the one making those decisions. So for those who don't know, loot boxes play on this mechanic in psychology and neurochemistry called dopamine triggers, which more or less concern how your body reacts to new things. And what it does is program the body to say, ooh, new shiny! And someone gets used to that feedback from the base game, and then they can get it faster or more often by paying in microtransactions. So any system using that mechanic is inherently exploitive.
This is the whole idea behind freemium games, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought people looked down on this stuff.
Well, consumers can look down on it all they want, but companies have kept including it in their games because they make a shit ton of money off of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think I've only ever spent stuff on DLC, but I'm one person. There could be another 200 people that spend $5 or $10 a month, and that's enough to justify this type of thing. It's number-wise. It's I'm curious to see many years down the line if we're gonna find some interesting. I can see possibly a group of people very like some maybe issues with their dopamine receptors in the future, and they happen to be these whales. That being said, this is something I'm just speculating, and these are things that I guess we talk about or is spoken about within circles of people that like games, and we always kind of see it as a negative light. I want to dig more into it and just really understand, I guess, what people are doing and how these behaviors are driving business decisions, which drive development of these games.
Yeah, I think one of the microcosms of that audience to look at, which aren't necessarily considered whales, but are a respectable, I guess most people would say, a respectable audience to have that same design philosophy for, are people with large, like 9 to 5 large jobs that take up a lot of their time. So they have a lot more money than they have time. So you have games like Shadow of War, the Lord of the Rings franchise, that was a almost single player only game. It had no competition, certainly, and it still had loot boxes you could pay real money for. And people were concerned that was them making the game artificially longer, so you'd have to buy those. But you could also easily say, oh, well, it's just, okay, if you want to pay to progress faster because you have less free time, that's what they did there.
Right. That's I think that also exists within the last 2 Assassin's Creeds. They have essentially XP you can buy for your character.
They did.
And I guess on paper that sounds like something I can even see myself purchasing if I find myself working 9-10 hours a day and I just want to get through something. Like I don't know where else I want to take this.
No. That's interesting because I have to admit I have been in similar scenarios myself. When you work a 9 to 5 job, sometimes 9 to 6 job, and then you add in, any other social thing you do, and then it comes down to maybe an hour or maybe 30 minutes of gaming a day, and sometimes on the weekends, maybe 3 to 4 hours of gaming on the weekend. And
right.
Sometimes you have big title games, and you're just like, I don't want to grind. Like, I have to grind so I can get to the game. I don't want to grind. Like, I just want to finish the game because you want that feeling of completion. So you just to pay for whatever the hell, because you have the cash and you're like thinking, well, I already spent some money here and there. May as well spend some money on the game. So and plus, you're also thinking, I also kind of want to support the developer because I like this game.
Yeah, they give me so much content.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I called it like a respectable subset. It's because most people would agree that that's an okay audience to cater to.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people's concern are just what I mentioned earlier about it making developers make it artificially long or hard to progress in the game to force you to buy those things.
Do you guys think you can see this in the next Bethesda games? Because they're notorious for being basically infinite. You can play them as long as possible.
Which is fantastic.
Right. Do you guys see, in the future, Bethesda's going to come out with these little, XP injections you can buy in Starfield?
What?
I don't see it happening, but I give it like a 70% chance that it's not going to happen.
Right, I think...
Starfield's probably Bethesda. You're right.
because they have what they've been doing is they've been using other games to tap into that revenue stream. So Elder Scrolls Online, now Fallout 76, Fallout Shelter, like they're more about putting out other games to tap into those revenue streams to allow them to make their main games and not have to do that.
So yeah, those are their B titles, and their main titles are gonna keep the traditional experience.
Yes. Now, I mean, maybe the executives will like beat out all of those people, and Starfield will, have that kind of stuff. But at the very minimum, they have a system that is working for them that keeps them from having.
Yes, the day the Todd Howard falls.
I love that guy.
Same. Todd Howard he's so good. Dom, I may say you are probably the most closest person in charisma to Todd Howard, and I think that's so much. No,
I will take that as a heavy compliment. Thank you.
Appreciate that so goddamn much. Because, I was there for the Bethesda E3 press conference, and when Todd Howard walked out, everyone just went mad crazy. And when he played the trailer, or the parody trailer for Skyrim on everything, people just went bonkers. They're just like,
oh, that was so funny.
So good.
Can you talk about how good it was getting Keegan-Michael Key for that?
Yes. Oh my god. Like, he put in the memes that people wanted. It was fantastic. Oh man.
That's one of the few times an actual meme has been capitalized.
It was fantastic, and it wasn't even capitalized by some memey person. It was capitalized by the guy who's at the center of the memes. It was fantastic.
It's kind of like the opposite of what Blizzard did with Diablo.
Now we're full circle.
They did not lean into it at all. It's actually one of my dreams was presenting a game at E3.
Same. I wish I could. I don't know if I would.
Well, you might get your chance. Of course, as you know, I have other things restricting me from entering the.
Yeah. I hear that's actually a pretty common dream with people that are trying to get into this industry. I remember in my internship over the summer, the guy I worked with, that's I just want to work at BioWare and be the guy on stage.
Yeah.
He was great. Actually, really liked working with him. I just felt I don't know, for me that was actually the first time I heard that dream. I'm okay, that's very oddly specific.
It's just, I don't know, dude, when you, for me at least, I remember when I saw my first E3 press conference. I think my first E3 press conference was Todd Howard for E3 2011, or no, E3 2010, when he was talking about Skyrim. And there was just a sparkle in his eyes and a slight smile in his, on his cheek and on his mouth. And I was just he looks like he's having a lot of fun.
Right, it's almost you're about to introduce something to the world that's going to change and make a lot of people happy. You're basically about to release the floodgates of emotion.
Exactly, and you could tell just how happy he was to be the one to deliver this news.
I have the good word. Listen.
Yeah.
I think it might be a little too big of a topic for tonight, but I think a good topic for next time would be talking about the industry.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of research.
like literally working in the industry and being an employee in game development.
I actually did a lot of research prior in case this question came up, tackling the union side and the crunch side and.
Oh, we actually did want to talk about that. That's right.
That's a 3-hour discussion, dude. I'm just
exactly. That's why I said maybe for next time.
We can all do research.
I just want to tap into that just a little bit. I'm just curious. So, how far are game industry unions at the moment?
How far?
Do they exist or
Yes. How far are movements at the moment?
They're gaining momentum, but I'm still gonna say they're fairly they're not huge. They're not present. They're not talking to design the people in management or publishing side. Yeah, I think it's still very much kind of in a immature state, but I am hopeful that it's growing. I know a lot of I was doing a lot of research on the Game Workers Union, which is like the most prominent aspect of that. And they have chapters in different cities where you can get registered. They have a lot of information, pamphlets, it's just information of what a union is and how to combat people that are trying to break it up. There's a lot of work that's been going on, that's been happening. There's actually a USC alumni that I think is really involved. And it's... Again, we can talk about it next time with the actual names. I think it seems like for me, as someone that's kind of on the outside, not really working the unions, I feel like there's like an event that will kind of bring things, not things together, but will actually cause more action to happen. I just don't know what that is. I know this news with Rockstar lately has been kind of bringing up more attention for unions, which I think is good. I like the concept of the union. The reality of making it seems like a lot of work. In some ways, I think I need to research more of the film union and that environment and how that got constructed, because that seems to be the biggest reference. That seems the biggest parallel to what's kind of going on in games.
Yeah, it's definitely the most similar space.
Yeah.
No, the biggest issue with the conversation about unions is usually the ignorance of the downsides of it. Because a lot of people are like, there would be no downsides, it would only help developers. And while I would say that is objectively true, if you think about how many people design games as a passion project and would hate to have to leave, at 40 hours every week because it means their favorite mechanic wouldn't get into the game, I think people would be surprised at how many developers would not make that trade.
Oh wait, is that what being a part of the union actually implies? Or like you would be...
If you're in it, you'd have to like follow union rules, from my understanding.
Ooh.
Otherwise, you're undercutting the entire union's negotiating power.
Oh, interesting. So
there are ways of letting that happen, bringing in more overtime income.
Yeah.
That I think the reason it would be disincentivized is because the cost would be higher for the company. And when it comes to passion projects, that's an entirely different area that I think it might have to... This is where games have to differentiate and understand how to balance that.
Definitely.
Oh, by the way, I found the name. Brendan Lobuglio. Sorry.
Yeah, I know him.
Yep. He was telling me about a gaming union that he was setting up when I got to meet him at during E3 week at one of the parties. Awesome guy.
He's a great guy.
It's always fun talking to him. I find his voice very soothing.
Oh,
that's a compliment.
Yeah, that's what I said to him when I met him. I was like, you have a very nice voice, dude. Like, holy crap, man.
You should have a side business, just talking nice things, saying nice things before you go to bed.
By the way, in regards to working many hours, I was thinking about this earlier today because I was watching a few Red Dead 2 gameplay stuff. Has there been any confirmation about the workers who complain about Rockstar's over hours?
Specifically how they're being treated in their studios? Yeah,
like, was it, are they being forced to do 80-hour work weeks during crunch time, or is this just normal?
A ton of people reached out to different outlets.
It's a lot of, because Rockstar is multiple studios in different locations of the world, each one seems to be treated slightly differently. So I'll use this as like a gradient, as like a scale. At worst, it seems like it's either mandatory or applied, and compensation may not be directly affected. It's more like the culture in management is so poor, and also with other workers. Like, if you don't work the full 80 whatever hours, they almost look at you as lesser because everyone else is doing it. It's almost like it's the behavior is so normalized, anyone breaking that convention is almost shunned. That being said, the different studios have different experiences. Some of them have said it's the best version of Crunch they've experienced because it wasn't as bad as Red Dead 1, or GTA 5. There's a huge range. I think a lot of the news that came out that was positive might be strategically sent out to undercut the issues that have been brought up. Knowing someone that actually has worked on the project, their experience has been much more on the negative side.